Alright, hello, welcome. My name is Shaina, I'm an astrologer, and today we are continuing my little Learn Astrology series. We are officially in 201. Yes, I did just arbitrarily decide that this would be 201 now. I don't know, maybe it's still 101, but I was like, I feel like it's 201. I feel like you need to kind of understand stuff to be here. Today we are talking about planetary rulers, or aka domicile placements in astrology. So my next videos will all be about the detriment placements, exalted and fall, and of course we are going to start with domicile. Basically, domicile is just a fancy word for having a placement in your birth chart or in astrology where the planet rules the sign. The placement is in its home sign. You know, sun would be in its domicile in Leo because the sun rules Leo. So there, it's in its home sign. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. Now, I'm not going to be talking about like all the characteristics of having your placement be in this, you know, home base. I'm going to talk about like why these attributes talk to each other, why this planet rules the sign, and how it works. I also want to mention with domicile placements, like everything in astrology, there's so many ways you could look at it. So naming something like domicile or exalted does not mean that it's all good all the time. In fact, sometimes, a lot of times, I should say, in astrology, when something is very intuitive, because that's really all it means, is that it's intuitive. And being intuitive and good all the time are two very different things. So sometimes when something is intuitive, it reinforces some negative or harder habits. And so don't kind of think because something is in its domicile or in its exaltation, it's like all amazing and lovely. Yes, there is a more natural expression of that energy, absolutely. However, it's like it doubles down, and sometimes it can double down on things that it maybe shouldn't double down on. But yes, before we get any further, let's just get into some advertising really quickly. So I sell birth chart readings on my website, shainaemily.com. Thank you to everybody who's gotten a reading. I really love talking to you guys, and I get really excited, especially if like there's a person that I like recognize their username of, and I get to put like a face to a name, and like, I don't know, it just means a lot. I really love doing this, and I love that I feel like I get to connect more to everybody doing the readings. Thank you so much for supporting me. Thank you so much for being here on my journey, and you know, no matter when you found me, it really does mean a lot, and I'm just so thankful I get to call this my job. And so thank you. But yes, I also have an astrology TikTok at shaina.emily. I do lives there at 6 p.m. So I totally understand if you can't afford a full-length reading or something, but maybe want to kind of hang out with me a little bit more or do like a more miniature reading that's more affordable. That is why I do those lives. And then I also have a personal Instagram. But yeah. So let me link my Learn Astrology course right here in the cards in case you are a little bit confused as to like when I'm talking about like what are planets or like what are planetary rulers or what even is a placement in astrology. How do I look at my birth chart? Lord knows. You know, all of the information will be right here. I've taught you all of it to get to this point. So today we are talking about like planetary rulers, okay? So every single planet rules a sign, and it kind of also helps you learn the qualities of that sign a little bit more, as well as the qualities of the planet. Everything in astrology is very intuitive, and it goes in with each other, you know? So we're gonna start with the sun. The sun rules Leo. So the sun is your personality, your ego, your essence, and Leo is all about cultivating that personality, that ego. Having a Leo sun is considered in its domicile because obviously we all want us to be all about us, right? Leo is, you know, kind of called egotistical sometimes, and that is because it's ruled by the sun, and everything revolves around the sun, and the sign of Leo really does feel like everything else in the world revolves around them. That's why Leo suns get that kind of characteristic of being the main character energy. You know, whether they are or aren't is debatable, but they definitely see themselves and treat their life as that way. Leo is all about self-exploration, and that's what the sun is truly all about. It's all about figuring out who you are, why you are the way you are. It's very self-motivated and self-oriented. The sun really wants to like climb to the top and be the best at something, and like, you know, the sun is what you want in this life, you know, and Leo is what you want as well. You know, Leo says, I want this, I want this, I want this, I want to get this, I want to get this, I want to get this, right? The sun can be a very creative energy because if you think about what the sun does, it creates. It literally makes it so we as humans and the grass and the animals around us and everything exists. It's very creative, literally. And Leo is known as a very creative sign. It wants to create things. It wants to make things, whether that be art, poetry, or kids. Leo suns, this is a side note, they love to procreate. They don't necessarily love being parents, but they love having kids and like continuing their bloodline. Just I think for the whole like ego thing of it all. I mean, if you think about what having a kid really is, it can be a very like ego-centered thing in all honesty. Not that that's a bad thing, but it is a true statement. You're saying my bloodline is so good that I want to continue it and make sure that it survives. And that's also what Leo and the sun both do, you know, it's that perpetuation of the self. Obviously, we all want our sun sign to be all about ourselves because that's the point of the sun sign, right? That's why Leo is comfortable in the sun sign, because it's all about me. And you want yourself to be all about me. You need a little bit of selfishness. Of course you do. You know, because if not, you know, you just be the perpetual martyr and you would just be living for everybody else. And that's not good either. That'll hurt you after a while as well. However, some maybe more cons or harsher sides of the Leo sun energy is that you can be really oblivious to what's happening around you and how you're affecting the things around you. Like if you think about the fact that the sun is like so hot, if something were to come too close to the sun, it would just like burn up and die. Now the sun doesn't care. The sun's like, I'm gonna be as bright and shiny and hot as I want to. Very Leo, as hot as I want to. You know, but it can really hurt a lot of feelings, and it can hurt a lot of people, and it can step on a lot of people or planets or beings or things in general, right? And sometimes it fails to see, like the sun or Leo, it fails to see how everything is necessary for it all to work out. You know, the sun can be like, well, whether you're here or not, Earth or other planets, I'm going to be here. And so there can be a little bit of obliviousness to what's going on and how they're affecting everybody around them. Leo sons have this weird combination of being hyper self-conscious while also being hyper self-unaware. Sometimes they really aren't sure how they're coming across to people, yet they're also super highly aware of who they are and what they're looking like and what they're acting like, but they're not really realizing how it affects the other. It can be a little bit blind to that. Also, I mean, maybe this is a little bit more of my bias and my personal opinion, and that's fine. I'm going to add it because this is my channel and I can. But there is a little bit of Leo sun that just kind of thinks that it should be pat on the back for just existing. You know, like the sun is like, I exist. You should pat me on the back. You should bow down to me. We all bow down to the sun, you know, just because I exist, the sun exists. So we all bow down to it, right? Jesus is the sun, whatever, doesn't matter. And so Leo can kind of have that inflated ego sense where it's like, I should be rewarded just for existing, which I mean, sometimes yeah, but also sometimes no, you know? And so there can be just this feeling where Leo can really do the least and expect the most. I can definitely see Leo suns like when they're young, really just living for themselves and fulfilling their own desires. And then when they're older being like, why is there nobody left around me? And everybody else being like, well, because you rampage through everyone and now we don't care about you. So just be cautious of the long term with that Leo sun energy. So that's why the sun rules Leo. Now let's go on to the moon. So the moon rules Cancer. A lot of people, for whatever reason, and it kind of drives me crazy, all the time comment on my TikTok that the moon is exalted in Cancer, and they go on about how the moon is in its best placement in Cancer, and that really bothers me because they're just wrong, right? Like, you can have an opinion that the moon is in its best sign in Cancer. Sure, that's your opinion. You can have it. But the moon is not exalted in Cancer. Like, what are you talking about? It's in its domicile. And it's not like I've just gotten this once. It's not like I've just gotten this twice. I get this all the time. All the time! So I'm just like, I don't know who is spreading this mass wrong information that the moon is exalted in Cancer, but I am here to speak things right and put things, you know, on their right way, on the right route. The moon is not exalted, but rather in its domicile in Cancer because the moon rules Cancer. The moon is our emotions. The moon is our feelings. It's our innermost self. It's that gushy, sweet part of us that even if it doesn't seem like somebody has it, we all do. It's all there. Even the absence of having it is still in some way having it, if that makes sense. But the moon rules Cancer because Cancer is also very emotional. It's very sensitive, I think is a good word. It's very sensitive to its environment. It's very sensitive to what's affecting it, what's affecting it, the people that it loves. It also rules the family and the home. The moon is all about where you feel safe in the birth chart, and most of us feel the safest in our home, and most of us want to cultivate a loving, sweet home, a loving, sweet family, and that is why the moon rules Cancer. Now, in some good ways, Cancer moons are very in touch with their emotions. They have no choice but to be. Now, I will say this can be a little bit of an overwhelming and enveloping moon placement. You know, the moon is all about seeking shelter, because if you think about it, in nighttime when the moon comes out, you seek shelter, you seek respite, right? When the sun is out, you can do whatever you want. You can be a Leo, you can have fun, you cannot care, blah, 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 right? But when the moon is out, you have to be cautious, you have to be smart, smart. You have to only surround yourself with the people and things that you feel safe with, right? It's all about safety. And that is what Cancer moon does. It finds its safety. It finds the things that it knows is predictable, warm, and safe. And that is very much the moon. Also, the moon changes sign the fastest out of every planet or luminary in astrology. And Cancer moons really do change emotions very quickly. They can be very emotionally happy and feeling very good and go quickly to being very sad and very down in the dumps. And they're just very affected by the moon's tides. You know, it's a water sign. They're very affected by the water and the moon and just their environment and all that kind of stuff. Also, the moon rules Cancer because this shows that there is a very strong mothering figure. Just like how I said, Leo suns have this want to procreate, less of a want to be a parent, but more of a want to keep their biology going, for, you know, I guess you could say. Now the moon wants to, you know, it's less about whether or not this is my child. I mean, of course that's very important to them, but the moon in Cancer can take care of something that's not their kid, you know, whether it be somebody else's child or an animal or a garden or a home, right? They'll take care of it like a mother. They will just instinctually mother things. Male or female, they will just instinctually nurture and want to mother. Or in another way, they can also really want to be nurtured and to be mothered as well. There's a real want and a strive for that too. The moon in Cancer can be so sensitive to its own emotions because that's what the moon is all about, my emotions. How am I feeling, right? And so Cancer moons can be super affected and super aware of only how they're feeling. And sometimes they can struggle to realize how their feelings are affecting everybody else, or they can just get really stuck in their emotions, or they can be kind of pouty, whiny, and moody, just like how the moon changes signs. That's how they're moody, you know? And so sometimes Cancer moons can play things a little bit too safe, if that makes sense. Like, I kind of think about the fact that we always know the moon is coming out every night, and I think moon in Cancer enjoys that kind of predictability. The moon always comes out every night, you know? It always changes sign every 2.5 days. If you don't like this emotion, then you'll be okay in the next few days. And there's something very predictable and safe about that. I think that's something that the moon in Cancer enjoys. They can sometimes be a little bit of a crybaby, a little bit of overly emotional people, a little bit even sometimes, you might disagree with me, but they might be a little bit only aware of their own emotions and struggle to kind of be aware of others' emotions. You know, Cancer squares Libra for a reason. So they can be so stuck in their emotions, they don't realize how their emotions are affecting everybody else and really bringing down the mood or awkwardly bringing up a mood when everybody's sad. You know, they can be a little bit stubborn sometimes in their emotions. So yes, the moon in Cancer is considered to be in its domicile, its home place, because you are a very emotional being a Cancer moon, but it is, you know, emphasis on it's my emotions, how I'm feeling, how I'm affected, and my sensitivity. And because it's this double moon, it's this double intuitive position, it's highly sensitive, and it can get bent out of shape on just the littlest of disturbances. And when there isn't safety, when there isn't this homey, warm feeling, it doesn't know how to deal with it. It can kind of spiral. It can't really be flung out into the wild and the wilderness like Aries can or other signs can. It needs to be very much taken care of and coddled and nurtured. And it can have a lot of problems if it isn't, and it can really be very strongly affected if it's not. Like, yes, the moon in Cancer can lead to a lot of like happiness, but in the same vein, it can also lead to a lot of depression and moodiness as well. There can also be a lot of want for isolation with the moon in Cancer as well. So now let's talk about Mercury. So Mercury is all about duality. It has little devil horns, right, on its glyph. And basically there are two signs that rule Mercury, and that's a really big point. Its dual rulership, I think, is really important and really pertinent to understanding Mercury. It kind of is like that angel on our shoulder and that devil on our shoulder, right? Mercury rules Virgo, the angel on our shoulder, as well as Gemini, the devil on our shoulder. So let's first talk about the rulership in Virgo. The sun is, no matter what, labeled as masculine because it's ruled by Leo, a masculine sign. The moon is always ruled as feminine because it's ruled by Cancer, a feminine sign. So we have the archetypal male, we have the archetypal female. now we have the archetype of androgyny, which is Mercury. Virgo is a feminine sign. Gemini is a masculine sign. But even Gemini, there's duplicity and duality in. And I will even argue that in Virgo, there's honestly a little bit of the same too, because it is ruled by Mercury in itself. Virgo rules Mercury because, oh my gosh, if you know anything about Virgo, it's so mental, it's so thinky. It wants to get the best grades, it wants to be on top mentally, it wants to be smart, it wants to be astute, it wants to be on it wants to be calculated, it wants to be precise, right? It is that angel on our shoulder telling us all the good deeds we should do, all the good things we should do, how to be a perfect person. It rules the anxiety that we all feel. It rules just that perfectionism in all of us that want to be good and smart and right. And when you have a Virgo Mercury, there is a real ability to be very smart and studious, but there is also this like spiraling obsessiveness, because to be good is almost impossible, right? What do morals even mean? Virgo Mercury can rule this real black and white thinking. It can compartmentalize everything between good and bad, and it can struggle to live at all in the gray area. Doing this is good, doing that is bad, but everything is perspective, and Virgo is a mutable sign. Mercury is ruled by two different mutable signs, so it shows how everything in this world is truly perspective. Yes, in my perspective, doing this is good, but in your perspective, or in your religion, or in the way that you were brought up, or in your home country, that same thing might be bad, right? So everything is perspective. I think of Virgo Mercury as kind of like knowing that you need to be adaptable, but struggling with it in the same vein, right? It's impossible to be good all the time, and Virgo Mercury can really beat itself up over that. It can also be very naggy because it kind of has like this little mental map of everything that needs to be done, everything that should be put in its place, everything that needs to be checked off its list, and it kind of gets anxiety and gets nervous when those things aren't done. So even though it is considered in its domicile, Virgo Mercury, because it is very smart and astute and studious and a quick learner and very good with its words, very good at writing essays and very good at writing speeches and, you know, all that kind of stuff, it also struggles with intense social anxiety. It struggles just with intense anxiety in general and nervousness and even OCD-like tendencies. And so it can be a hard placement to have because it's like hyper good and mercurial and obsessive.
To summarize it really quickly, Virgo Mercury is like book smarts, whereas Gemini Mercury is like street smarts.
Now on the other side, we have the devil on our shoulder, which is Gemini Mercury. This is the Mercury that lives in the gray area that Virgo fears, right? Gemini Mercury is there to say, oh yes, that's black and that's white, but there's gray. And let me talk to you about gray, right? Gemini Mercury is not as grade oriented. It's not as status oriented as Virgo Mercury. It's more about the conversational side of Mercury, right? It's more about, oh, how do I schmooze this person? How do I talk to this person? How do I get on this person's level? How do I get this person on my side? How do I get what I want with my words? How do I use trade and this back and forth to kind of get what I need and also satisfy their needs as well, so everybody's happy, right? Virgo Mercury is a real trickster, right? And Mercury is as well. You know, the fact that we're able to lie as people shows that not just Virgo rules Mercury, that also Gemini does. Gemini Mercury is kind of like that ability to lie and that ability to play with words and that ability to play with the white lies and to kind of outwit and outsmart Virgo Mercury in a way that they wouldn't ever think because they have such black and white thinking. Like, yes, Virgo Mercury has a better grade point average than Gemini Mercury, but Virgo Mercury is working 10 times as hard while Gemini Mercury schmoozes Virgo Mercury out of their homework and gets a similar grade as well. Maybe they have a B, you know, but they didn't even do anything. They don't even know what they're talking about, but they were able to figure their way out to where they are. And so that is that smart and cunning side of Mercury. Now, Gemini Mercury, I will say, has the ADHD side of Mercury, right? If Virgo Mercury is the OCD, Gemini Mercury is the ADD or ADHD. It can be doing a billion things at once. It has trouble focusing. It sometimes can talk to dyslexia or trouble reading or things of that nature, like how Virgo Mercury does so well with writing speeches. Gemini Mercury does so well with giving last second made up improvised speeches, which Virgo Mercury could never because of their social anxiety. It's kind of like these two placements pick up the slack where the other left off. Now let's move to Venus. So Venus is also a dual ruled energy. It's ruled by Taurus and it's ruled by Libra. So Venus has two major characteristics. It talks about the indulgence. It talks about the luxury things that we kind of like even how we like dress ourselves, our values, how we adorn the things around us. That's very Taurus Venus. And it also speaks to that like stable commitment side of Venus that wants, you know, love from one person and one person only. And then is that like hopeless romantic. And then we have the Libra Venus, which is more about, they both rule indulgence, but Taurus in a more physical sense and Libra in a more, what do you even call it? Like complimentary sense, I guess, for lack of a better word. Like they just want to be complimented. They want to be fed love. They want to feel good vibes. They want, you know, things to be peace and harmony and beautiful in a more air sign sense, right? In a more communicative sense. Whereas Taurus wants to experience Venus in a more environmental sense, right? Libra wants their other half, but Taurus wants that person that they can possess, if that makes sense. So Venus rules Taurus because of what I said. It's all about those finer luxuries. It's all about indulging in love. These people with Taurus Venus can actually get lovesick a lot of the times and really feel like if there's nobody that they can cuddle and they can snuggle and they could, you know, give those good cushy feelings to, that they don't have like a purpose or like they don't know where to put it all, and that's why they can get lovesick, you know? Taurus Venus is very committed as well. When they pick somebody, they stick with them, and there's really like no going back on their word or that relationship. Sometimes almost no matter what happens, it can be really hard for them to let go of people. They can be super overindulgent, and they can sometimes be very hedonistic because they really want to like quench that Venusian thirst, and Taurus has a very big appetite, and so sometimes that thirst can never be quenched. And then on the other side, we have the Libra Venus, where Taurus Venus is all about like, I want those good cushy feelings from that one person I picked. Libra is a little bit more like what we think more about Venus, I think, like stereotypically, like just wanting love and adoration from anybody and whoever will give it to them. They can be a little bit more, is fickle the right word? They can be a little bit like, Taurus is more finicky and Libra is more fickle. Is that the way you say it? Taurus wants one or two luxury fur coats that they just love and hang up and treat with such respect and dignity. Whereas Libra is like, oh, I'll take 20 Shein coats because I'm so indecisive and I just want anything to match my outfit and I just want to look like luxury. Whereas Taurus really wants to experience luxury. Libra is a little bit more shallow. It's more of that shallow side of Venus. It's more of that want for the other half. Yes, Taurus can be very possessive in a negative sense, and Libra can be more cooperative in a Venusian sense, which is where the positive comes out in Libra Venus. However, a lot of times its motivation is, if I am cooperative with people, they love me more and they give me the adoration and the likeness that I want. Like Libra Venus can really struggle when somebody doesn't like them. They really do not like that. Taurus Venus doesn't really care who likes them or not. In fact, even if their partner doesn't like them, they don't really care because as long as they're still with them, you know? Libra Venus can be a little bit fickle because it'll just take the adoration and the affection wherever it can get it. It can have a spending problem or a shopping problem. Like I said, it'll buy so much and it can fill it, and it's so indecisive, so it can fill its closet up with clothes or whatever its hobby is. Now, both of these placements are very artistic and very, very creative. Libra Venus is a little bit more all about how it dresses itself, fitting in with the trends a little bit more. It is a little bit more of a follower than a leader just because it makes it feel better about itself in that way. And it can be very pleasant to be around as well. It's very sociable. It's very hospitable. Taurus Venus might not want anybody coming over because what if they spill something on my fur coat? Libra Venus is like, why would I care about my 20 Shein fur coats? I want people to be around and to enjoy and to revel in because it's all about harmony and community, you know? Libra Venus can, however, be very flirty. They can flirt with everybody and they can go wherever they get their kind of kicks, if that makes sense. Like, oh yes, this person, you know, gives me the money that I need or gives me this thing that I need, but all these other people I can't help but flirt with because they give me that self-satisfaction and that they feed that Venus in me that I need to be fed. Both these placements have a lot of trouble being single. Both of these placements really rely on having a partner. It's very like my shirt, actually, now that I think about it, like a Renaissance painting is what Libra and Taurus Venus feel like. Laying down and being fed grapes is very much the strong Venusian energy, but there can be, again, a tendency to overindulge and be stressed out about it. Taurus Venus is more likely to overindulge and not care and just like live in its gluttony, whereas Libra Venus will be hyper fixated on it and get on Ozempic, you know? Okay, next up for the personal planets, we have Mars. Now, this is where we kind of branch off. There are traditional rulers and modern rulers. Now, I am going to talk more about the modern rulers of the placements because I'm just going to be honest, I'm more of a modern girl. And I care more about the modern placements, and I think we discovered the rest of the planets for a reason. So I will still touch on the traditional rulers, but I definitely think the modern rulers are kind of more relevant and more, A plus B equals C about it, you know. Mars is in its domicile in Aries. Duh! So Aries is angry. Aries is going to throw shit. Aries is going to cause a tantrum, is going to have a fit. If they're mad, they're just going to be mad. Ooga booga, very Mars. Mars and Aries are both a Neanderthal. I'm going to get mad. I'm going to go after what I want. I have one goal and one goal only, and that's survival. Both of those energies are like this. How do I survive? How do I get to the top? How do I get what I want? Mars and Aries can be very ruthless. It's not very tactful. It's not very vindictive. It just acts when it feels, right? It doesn't need to be vindictive because it got it all out already when it happened. It doesn't really dwell on things. It just like lives in the moment, right? Mars and Aries can be good because you get all that anger out and aggression when you want to and when you need to, but it can also be a little bit negative because there is a strong immaturity there and there is a very me-centered attitude, right? Ooga booga, I want sex and I don't care, not to be too rude, but or too vulgar, but Mars and Aries is very vulgar, so I guess I'll be vulgar, but like Mars and Aries can sometimes be a little bit like, this is what I want out of sex. I really don't care if that's not what you want. It really doesn't matter to me because Mars is all about filling my own desires and Aries is about I want this and I want this now. So there can be a little bit of a very strong selfish nature in sex or in anger. Like if it were fight or flight, Mars and Aries would be fight every single time, right? And so in that way it's good. You're always going to defend yourself. You're always going to stand up for yourself. If not, be on the offense most of the time. But you are quick to anger. You are quick to get heated. And you can be very simplistic and very rudimentary in your rage and your anger and not very tactful or diplomative. So if you were to have to debate, a Mars and Aries really wouldn't be able to. They can just like get mad and throw shit and make a scene, And then we have Mars and Scorpio. So I'll just touch on this for a second. If Mars and Aries is the Marine, then Mars and Scorpio is the war strategy that the Marine is taking orders from, right? Mars and Scorpio is much more tactful. It's much more diplomative. It's much more, it sees Mars as a battle rather than just a battlefield like Mars and Aries does. I move my knight here and you move your queen there and then I take your king, right? Where Mars and Aries is like, fuck chess. Why would I even spend time doing that? Let's put our fists up. You know what I mean? Like, why would Mars and Aries play chess? There's literally no point. But Mars and Scorpio is a much more vindictive and revengeful side of Mars. It's incredibly sexual. Both of these placements are incredibly sexual. And Mars and Aries are just going to go and get what it wants in sex, whether you want it or not. But Mars and Scorpio is going to convince you that that's also what you want in sex, whether it is what you want or not. It's going to be forceful, but in a very different, secretive, sly way than Mars and Aries is. Okay, now let's go on to Jupiter. So Jupiter also has the traditional rulership and the modern rulership. I consider Jupiter very much more ruled by Sagittarius. I feel like it's just obvious, but it is also co-ruled by Pisces, and I do get why, and I will talk about that for a second as well. So obviously, Jupiter rules Sagittarius. Jupiter and Sagittarius is like the gambler energy, right? Like it's all about karma. What goes around comes around. It's all about luck. It's all about being bigger and taller and better. Jupiter and Sagittarius is just a big like luck and risk placement. You know what I mean? It has trouble thinking about consequences, long-term consequences of things, long-term planning. It's all about living in the here and the now. Both of these energies are. Jupiter and Sagittarius, usually these people just kind of like happenstance upon their luck. Sometimes these people also have like a big appetite. These people can overindulge, overeat, overindulge in the luxuries, overindulge in whatever the hell it is that they like to overindulge in. And that's where kind of some problems can come in. However, usually with Jupiter and Sagittarius, like, things turn out fine in the end, and their guardian angel of Sagittarius and Jupiter saved them in the end anyway, so it's like they're kind of fine. It's very rare that Jupiter and Sagittarius suffers any real consequences. Now, Jupiter and Sagittarius can really step on the toes of everybody that it's around, and can be even more braggadocious and more selfish than like Mars and Aries, or even Leo Sun sometimes. Eventually, those energies will snap out of it, but I do wonder if Jupiter and Sagittarius will, because I think Jupiter and Sagittarius knows that in the long term they'll be fine. Mars and Aries may think, ooh, my survival counts on this, I need to snap out of it. And Leo Sun may think, oh my gosh, my ego is hurt, I need to snap out of this. People don't like me, that hurts my ego. Jupiter and Sagittarius really couldn't give a fuck. It's the ultimate sign of confidence. It's never going to snap out of it, and that can be really, really hard on the Jupiter and Sagittarius. They are the most likely sign to take whatever is given to them, drugs, pills, alcohol, whatever. They'll do it and they don't really care, right? And it can really be to the consequence of everyone around them. They live fast, they live hard, YOLO. It's about living here and now and not for the future, and so that can cause future consequences. It's totally the energy of winning the lottery and losing it in like a year. You know what I mean? Like, you won big, but you didn't have that future planning to invest it or whatever it might be to kind of sustain it for a long period of time. There's usually also a lot of luck in travel and enjoyment in travel and exploration and all that sort of stuff, which is really fun. Jupiter in Pisces. So the reason why that I think Pisces is co-ruled by Jupiter is because Pisces really love to indulge as well. We'll talk more about the modern rulership of Pisces later, but I mean, Jupiter in Pisces is totally that indulgent side of Pisces that over-escapes into their fantasy world, and lives in their own delusions and just does more and more and more and more, has trouble saying no, has trouble stopping. Also, if you think about it, Jupiter can also give and give and give and give, right? Jupiter and Sagittarius are usually pretty good gift givers as well. Usually they know that what goes around comes around, so they usually can give back in like these really big grand gestures as well, I should say. And Pisces can be a real like martyr placement, and so they really can like give and give and give and give. And sometimes they might just like give too much, or give things that they regret, or give too much of their emotional self over to somebody else. And so they can be really emotionally giving and martyr themselves emotionally to somebody else, and it can really drain them. But I really do think that the main reason why, Pisces was originally ruled by Jupiter is just because, like, drugs, doing more drugs, being addicted to drugs. Saturn. So, again, Saturn is co-ruled. Saturn rules Capricorn as the modern ruler and Aquarius as a traditional ruler. Now, I should say, even in traditional sense, it was co-ruling. It was always ruling, like Jupiter was always ruling Sagittarius. Saturn was always ruling Capricorn. It just also ruled Aquarius. Saturn in Capricorn. Saturn rules the strategy of how we complete our projects, how we complete the project of life, if that makes sense. And Capricorn is very diligent. It sets big goals and it works really hard every day consistently to reach those goals. And at the end of the day, that is kind of what we want out of life. We want to have this big overarching goal that we slowly trudge to the top of and pick away at day in and day out. And then finally we get to the culmination of, that is kind of like the goal of life, basically. And so in that way, it is very good. It's very cautious. It's very safe. It's very aware. It's very good at handling emergency situations. It stays focused. It stays calm. It makes good decisions. It makes practical decisions, even in the heat of the moment. And in that way, it is very good. However, Saturn in Capricorn can be too cautious and can be a wet blanket over things, and can be a real hard ass, can be a real tough ass, can struggle to have fun, can struggle to let loose, can struggle to do anything at all that sways off the plot of the main overarching life goal that they decided on. They have a lot of trouble at all taking some fun routes and doing the Jupiter and Sagittarius thing of overindulging or taking the thing that's handed to them. Like Saturn and Capricorn can sometimes just be so overly cautious that they almost let life pass them by because they're so focused on that greater overarching goal that they may even never get to, that sometimes they yeah, they live for the future too much, you know, and they don't really live for the here and now at all. And they can also be so like trying to get there that they don't enjoy the situations and celebrate the things that they've won as it comes. You know, they don't celebrate their victories as they come. They just pass through them because, oh, it's not a victory because it's not my overarching goal in life, so therefore I can't celebrate it. And so they miss a lot of the best parts of their life sometimes. This can be a real curmudgeon. This can be a real Scrooge, you know, in a Christmas Carol, where they literally need a ghost to show them back through their life so they're more thankful for the moment and enjoy themselves more in the moment. It's a very Saturn and Capricorn trope. And then Saturn in Aquarius. So the reason why I think Saturn rules Aquarius or co-rules Aquarius is because Aquarius is all about feeling like the odd one out, feeling like the person that doesn't fit in. And when you feel like the person that's the odd one out or doesn't fit in, you are isolated. And Saturn can rule isolation. And that is where I think Saturn rules Aquarius, where you have to really stand strong on your own, be solid and strong in your own morals and your own views. Saturn and Capricorn is very moralistic, for better or for worse, very much so. And Saturn and Aquarius can be, but it can be a little bit up and down, you know? But it just kind of shows like, even though I was excluded from the main cool crowd, I'm standing on my own and being strong because of it. And that's where I think that Saturn comes in. But also it can sometimes be isolated just for the sake of isolation. Like, I don't want to be a part of you guys. I'm too cool for you guys. And this makes me uncomfortable. Saturn in Aquarius, though, it can have this like issue where if everybody starts doing the thing that they like or that they were isolated from, they reject it. And they can really just be like, ugh, I want nothing to do with it now that everybody else likes it, you know? And it's like, well, why do you care if what everybody else is doing? Like, you didn't care that everybody else disliked it. You still did it. So why all of a sudden when everybody likes it, you care? But it's almost like if they're trendy, they hate it and they turn against it. And it's almost like their Achilles heel because just like, don't focus on that stuff. Just do what you want to do, you know? But Saturn and Aquarius can't. They're so hyper fixated on what everybody else is doing. And if they're the not cool version of doing it, if that makes sense, right? It's this weird line that they're obsessed with. It's a millennial thing. It's why I think there's that concept of being like a poser, and they hate that so much. And they hate when like emo gets too popular and then gets called e-girl, right? That's like Saturn and Aquarius to me. Anyways, so now we're going into the modern planets. The last 3 planets all just have modern rulers because they're the modern planets, and so they were discovered recently, and so they're the planets that a lot of the ones that doubled up on their actual rulership I would consider being here. It just makes the most sense. This is actually, you know what I'm noticing is that for whatever reason, in the generations, planets have been in their domicile placement, and we know of a generation with every single domicile placement. For example, Gen Alpha is the domicile Neptune in Pisces, Gen Z is the domicile Uranus in Aquarius, and millennials are the domicile of Pluto in Scorpio, which is really interesting. I actually never noticed that. That's incredibly rare because if you watched my outer planets in astrology video, you'll know how slowly these planets move, and so it's not like everybody experiences all the generations of all the Uranus or Pluto signs. So that's actually really interesting that there's a lot of domicile energies coming to light, and so I feel like we can really see why saying Cancer moon is exalted because it's in its domicile is fucking dumb. Okay, Uranus. Uranus is in its domicile, or Uranus rules the planet of Aquarius. Gen Zs have their Uranus in Aquarius. I actually do have my Uranus in Aquarius. If anybody cares, I don't know, but I'm half millennial, half Gen Z is kind of what I say I am. Uranus in Aquarius is why Gen Zs all want to be weirder than the other one, you know? And I have this energy too, so like, listen, I can call it myself too, like, come on. But yeah, Uranus and Aquarius's goal is to just be the weirdest, most different, most unique person, basically. And it's always trying to like one up the other one, basically. They feel really out of place. They feel really different than everybody else around them, different than their family. There can be even black sheep kind of feelings with Uranus and Aquarius. Also with Uranus and Aquarius, there's this want for chaos. There's this want sometimes for chaos just for the sake of chaos. Like, if things stay too stagnant, if things stay too boring, if things stay too mild, if things stay the same, it's just, there's no point to it. Like, they will just sometimes almost sabotage for the sake of chaos, for the sake of change. Now, that's why Uranus and Aquarius are all revolutionaries, and Gen Zs all want to lead the political revolution, and why each one wants to be stronger than the other, and, you know, letting you know their politics. And Uranus and Aquarius is really radical. It doesn't mean that it's necessarily liberal, but what it means is that whatever its political leaning is, it's going to be very radical and very steadfast and very strong in its feelings. If it's conservative, it's going to be the alt-right, where it's like hyper conservative and like extreme and radical, right? But if it's going to be liberal, it's not just going to be democratic, it's going to be like communistic, socialistic, like extremely, extremely liberal. It's the world of extremes, right? And also with Uranus and Aquarius, it wants to shake up and change everything that hasn't been changed or has been settled for a while, right? Also, it rules technology. It makes sense that Gen Z was the first generation that was raised from when they were really little to when they were older with technology. Like, I'm a middle child, so I got my first real phone when I was in like 5th grade. So I'm not going to say that I was like raised with the technology at all times, but I also definitely was raised with technology in the same vein, right? That's why I'm a middle child there. But most of Gen Z has been raised with technology, with a phone, with a computer, with a laptop, with the TV, all that kind of stuff in their household. And Uranus rules technology, and so does Aquarius. Uranus and Aquarius is all about fast forward movements, you know, moving things forward, propelling things forward, no stagnancy. So it makes sense that there have been extreme technological shifts and advancements during the Uranus and Aquarius era. Now, sometimes Uranus and Aquarius can want to be a contrarian just for the sake of being a contrarian, and can want to kind of be rebellious just for the sake of being rebellious. So if you say the grass is green, they'll say it's blue just to be rebellious in the nature. Or more like, I think what it is, if you say the grass is green, they'll say, but how do you know that my green is your green? How is that not just perspective? How do we know for sure that when I see the color green, you also see the color green, right? Like, it's just kind of like a contrarian for the sake of being a contrarian, where there's no actual answer to the situation. Uranus in Aquarius is very radical, and it moves things forward, but at what cost, right? At what cost are we pushing all this technology forward? At what cost for our future and for our humanistic sense of selves are we pushing things forward? Uranus and Aquarius can be very robotic, and can be very unemotional, and can be very dehumanizing even, and technology has been known to do all of those things. I'm a big fan of Ted Kaczynski's Industrial Revolution and its future. It makes sense that he has quite a bit of Leo energy with his Leo rising and his Leo moon, as he is against the Industrial Revolution, and the Industrial Revolution is very Uranus and Aquarius, and just Aquarius energy in general, or Uranian energy in general. The Industrial Revolution actually happened right around the time that we discovered Uranus, actually, anyways. But, you know, basically Ted Kaczynski's thing is like, we are missing out on the actual means of survival and the actual means of individualism because we are substituting in technology, and we won't be able to do anything because of it. And Uranus and Aquarius can talk to a lot of dependency on the unit, dependency on the collective. It can have a lot of trouble finding its individual identity because it identifies so much with the collective. Even the concept of labeling, I'm this gender, I'm this sexual orientation, I'm this race, I'm this ethnicity. You know what I'm saying? Like, all these labels, hyper labeling things, can be very Uranus and Aquarius, because, and its want to not be put in a box, it kind of puts itself, controversially, it kind of puts itself in a box because of all these excess labels. Oh, I want to be the person with the weirdest amount of labels, and therefore you kind of put yourself in a box. Now, this is super controversial, but it's close to the end of the video, so hopefully I've lost most of the people that don't relate to me anyways. But with Uranus and Aquarius, I do think, like, the fact that racism has really, you know, gone down with Gen Z in a lot of ways, or at least that really strongly radical side of Gen Z is very Uranus and Aquarius. Like, hey, we don't care about these outside things don't matter, rah, rah, Uranus and Aquarius, right? There's also a little bit of dehumanizing that comes with that too, you know, like not recognizing all the racial backgrounds and all that kind of stuff, and creating this like one race is very like Uranus and Aquarius, like that South Park thing. Again, I'm not trying to be political or social, like I'm not trying to like say my opinion about anything. I am literally just like pointing out things, if that makes sense. I really don't want this to be like a political debate channel, because I really hate politics. I'm very anti-politics in every way. I just like observing things, which is also controversial in itself that like I don't vote. So that's also very like Uranus and Aquarius thing. So you guys can get mad about me for not voting in the comments, but I really don't care. But also with Uranus and Aquarius, I do think that it makes sense that it's more that Gen Z is more into astrology, and people call astrology like space racism as like a dig, and I'm like, but it's kind of true. Like I know that people don't want to hear that, and I know that's really controversial, but it is kind of just like a different way to label people and characterize people. It's like a new kind of way that we found that like characterizes characteristics rather than the outside of a person. You're not characterized by how you look externally, you're characterized by who you are internally and how the world has affected you, which is astrology. But it is kind of space racism. It is just kind of like a new way to label people, and that is very Uranus and Aquarius. It finds a new way to label people, but also is it just substituting one thing for something just as similar. Now obviously I love astrology, I'm just being honest here. My Uranus is in Aquarius, so I can have a little bit of that as well, hyper labeling people and compartmentalizing people through their astrology, you know. But yes, now let's move on to Neptune. Okay, so Neptune rules Pisces. We actually just had a Neptune in Pisces generation, Gen Alpha, which makes so much sense that they were the COVID generation and they don't know how to interact with other people and they only know how to live in their fantasy world of their phone. Very Pisces Neptune. This is just a side note, but I've thought this for a really, really long time. Like since I first got into astrology and I found out that Gen Alpha was Neptune in Pisces, or going to be, I figured Neptune in Pisces was when we were gonna legalize drugs completely, like legalize drugs for everybody. And I still think that when the Neptune and Pisces Gen Alpha generation is older, it's just going to be a thing. Like all drugs I think are going to be legalized. And I'm not here to comment about how I feel about that. I'm just here to say that that is my prediction. So Neptune rules Pisces because Neptune is our delusions, our illusions, our fantasy land, our fantasy world, our dreams, our fantasies, life between life and death, our psychic ability, our psychic power. And what is Pisces? All the stuff I just listed. So Neptune in Pisces has obvious issues because it can get lost in its own fantasies. It can struggle to differentiate between reality and like dreamland. It can be hyper overindulgent, like it's stuck in a dream state. It can be exceptionally lazy. It can be exceptionally hard to wake up in the morning, and it can just sleep its life away. Like a lot of Gen Alpha kids are getting shit for their parents just putting their screen in front of their face for their entire life, and they're almost like growing up on a screen instead of growing up and looking out what's around them. They're growing up in an imaginary world rather than growing up in the physical world. It's very Neptune and Pisces. It can also equal that isolation because of COVID, right? They weren't properly socialized. That's very Neptune and Pisces. Now there is a great ability for them to be highly creative, highly spiritually in touch people, right? I even think about now that astrology is getting more prevalent, probably around when Neptune was in Pisces, a lot of their kids will grow up with astrology more than most people, and that will make them much more spiritually in tune, psychically in tune. All Gen Alphas will have this sort of like psychic spiritual connection to each other, and that is because they were connected to each other on the phone in a way that we weren't. They all kind of are psychically connected, even though they don't really know each other in real life. They only know each other in this fantasy world. The fantasy world becomes reality when you are a Neptune and Pisces. Now there can be, like I said, this major overindulgence thing. There can be this like real martyrdom as well. There can be this like, oh, help me, oh, save me, oh, I don't know how to live in this world. Like, you think Neptune and Pisces are going to be able to do retail jobs or office jobs or just like your basic job? No, none of them are going to be able to do it because of their Neptune and Pisces. But I do think that Gen Alpha is going to absolutely revolutionize the workplace like nobody's ever seen before because of their Neptune and Pisces. They want to not work, or their complete distaste towards work, as well as their Pluto and Capricorn, which literally revolutionizes the workplace. So I think that when they're older, work will look nothing like it does now. It can just be very passive. They can have trouble like asserting themselves, and Neptune and Pisces can have trouble like, you know, they're really soft generation. Like, whether, however you feel about that is how you feel about it. But they're getting really protected and taken care of. Even if they're not taken care of, Neptune and Pisces can equal a lot of neglect. However, it's not, almost sometimes like if you, oh, this is so controversial. I don't mean for it to be, but if you're like really hammering your kid and really on them, it's not neglect because you're so focused on them. But if you're not on them or hammering them, it's a little bit of neglect because you're kind of like letting them get away with too much. There's no happy medium here. There's no happy medium with Neptune and Pisces. There's no happy medium with any domicile placement, and that is what is hard about them. Hopefully you understand why sometimes having a domicile placement and having something be too intuitive isn't always the best thing, you know? And drugs. I don't know how any of these kids with Neptune and Pisces are going to have any sense of moderation at all, you know? And lastly, we have Pluto. So Pluto rules Scorpio, aka Pluto is in its domicile in Scorpio. This is the millennials, okay? Makes sense why millennials had that big phase of scene kids, emo kids, like all that stuff is super duper Pluto and Scorpio. Pluto and Scorpio, I mean, they were all going through like the housing crisis, you know, that big thing when like everybody was taking out, oh, what's the word? Mortgage loans or whatever it's called, to put the word right here, on their houses and losing their houses, losing their stability, having to regain their stability. The world's really shifting and really changing during this Pluto and Scorpio time. Also, Pluto and Scorpio is very depressed, and a lot of millennials, I'll say it like it is, a lot of millennials do deal and do struggle with a lot of depression. That's where the whole scene and emo kid thing came from, right? Vans Warped Tour is very Pluto and Scorpio.
I was just thinking about how Uranus and Aquarius Gen Z generation deals more with the absence of feeling, right? Which is very much that energy of Aquarius, the detachment from feeling. And that's like their version of depression. Whereas I think the millennial generation deals more with the Pluto and Scorpio depression of like extreme sadness, feeling so much, being overcome by so much grief and sadness, you know?
It speaks to a generation that was aware of mental health for the first time. You know, their parents really ignored it and really pretended it didn't exist. And I do think that millennials kind of like opened the door for us being like, no, mental health does exist. We do need therapy. People need therapy. People need to understand their psychology. People need psychologists. We do need to be medicated if we need to be. And that big controversy on whether you should be medicated or not is very Pluto and Scorpio. 9/11 is the perfect example of an event that happened during Pluto and Scorpio. It makes sense that with Pluto and Scorpio, that one single event framed millennials' childhoods. You know what I mean? That's very Pluto and Scorpio. One single event, a complete destruction of something, changed the entire future and discourse for everything to come. That's Pluto and Scorpio. Everybody dwelled on it. Everybody sat in that. Everybody had trouble getting past it. For good reason. And it was also a big conspiracy theory, Pluto and Scorpio. What's really going on behind the scenes? What is behind the curtain of Oz, right? That's very Pluto and Scorpio. Investigating, conspiracy theory, trying to find out the truth of something, getting to the truth of the matter. Did Bush do 9/11 or not? Do we trust our political figures or not? Do we trust people in power or not? That is very Pluto and Scorpio. It is a very intense placement. Every millennial holds this intense energy. That also, I think, is why they're a little bit more introverted and a little bit more cautious about what they put online. Also, they are the first generation of being online. I don't have Pluto and Scorpio, but I will say that I was on the internet at a much younger age than a lot of people when it was like the Wild West, and I was definitely exposed to a lot of sexual and devious things that I maybe shouldn't have been exposed to or just was younger to be exposed to. But like I remember when YouTube was the Wild West and you could post anything on YouTube. I saw so much, I'll say, graphic content on YouTube when I was in elementary school. That just so opposite to what it is now and the censorship that goes on now. And you could really get access to anything you ever wanted. They were exposed to a lot of things a lot younger than most people were in previous generations, right? There's that whole cliche in previous generations, you had to find somebody's Playboy or steal somebody's whatever it was to be exposed to these things. But when millennials were growing up, it was the first generation where they could just be exposed to it very simply and very easily. Very Pluto and Scorpio, right? There is also a big shift in changing of religious values with Pluto and Scorpio. There's just big shifts. One big event like 9/11 really shifting the perspective of everyone. And I do think that there's an obvious break between millennials and everything after versus millennials and everything before those generations. Like it's kind of like a major split. And I think it will always seem that way because of the internet, but also because of this Pluto and Scorpio thing that these millennials carry. So it's really intense and powerful aspect to really start things off in like a new transformative way, but it's really hard and it's really painful, and they go through a really hard, much more tumultuous, much more emotionally intense life than most other generations. So yes, it is really cool to have all that power, but it's like with great power comes great responsibility, right? Yes, there's so much interest and growth that can come from 9/11 and like what we learned and all the stuff that was exposed, but you don't want to actually go through it. You know, you don't want to actually be involved in that. Very Pluto and Scorpio. Because Scorpio, as I said, both Scorpio and Pluto, I should say, death, loss, transformation, regeneration, all those themes. But I'm sure you know that already if you're watching this video. Anyways, all right, so that is all the domicile placements in astrology. I hope that this helped you understand that just because something is intuitive in astrology doesn't mean it's all good. And just because something is unintuitive in astrology doesn't mean that it's all bad. Everything, it has so much complexities to it and has so many perspectives. And I'm hoping that this little like mini series within my series of learning astrology helps you understand that. Thank you so much for watching. What planets in your birth chart do you have, if any, in their domicile, and what are your experiences with them? But again, I sell birth chart readings on my website, shaina.emily.com. I have an astrology TikTok at shaina.emily, and I have a personal Instagram. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed my first episode of Learn Astrology 201. And I'll see you next time. I will probably be doing placements in their detriment, so look out for that. All right, thank you so much for watching, you guys. Bye.